Hi everyone. Welcome to the NIBS Worldwide Business Case Competition of 2014. The consultancy team presenting is the IBA University. I'm your timekeeper, so when you have 20 minutes for your presentation, I'll be sitting there. I'll show you a card for when you have 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 3 minutes and 1 minute. If you could nod, so I know you've received the message. And also for the judges, I'll be calculating your 10 minutes and I'll be sitting over there so you guys can see me and you guys can see me. Judges, if you want to present yourself to your students, and your students, you can start your presentation.
Thank you, Mark. I'm Dr. Lee Rose. I'm chairing this session today.
My name is Peter Rose.
I'm Rebecca. I'm Martha.
Are you guys okay? Yeah, okay to start.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, dear jury, we are a team from Denmark, DS Consulting, and here with me today are my colleagues Boniface from Hungary, James from the United Kingdom, Brian from Denmark, and I myself am Agatha from Latvia. On today's presentation's agenda is brief explanation of current strategic situation, followed by internal and external analysis. Afterwards, alternatives, recommendation and implementation strategies will be proposed to you. Now, Boniface will start with explaining the strategic situation.
Thank you very much, Agatha. So, as said before, we are going to be having a quick look at the strategic situation and first the key issues that the organization is currently facing. We are going to uncover them and we are going to delineate appropriate goals to resolve these issues. So now that I see the issues, we can state that there is an insufficient capacity to actually match demand so that the organization does not produce enough in clear terms. And there is a steadily increasing demand, so that you need to increase and broaden supply. And as well as there are tangible and social costs of alternatives when it comes to development, therefore it hinders the ability to choose a right decision. As well as there is of course a political meddling in the industry that is a characteristic of the industry. So what goals do we actually propose to resolve these key issues? We propose that you are going to make use of new and sustainable sources of supply, as well as to actually optimize the capacity and distribution of the supply of yours, and to minimize external reliance, most importantly. So, the question to drive the presentation is how should IBA distribute its resources in order to create an abundant and cheap supply of electricity amidst this very challenging market environment. So now, let us see the analysis that will uncover the key facts to answer this question. James?
Thank you, Boniface. So the first thing we're going to do is look at your company's internal source of value in order to establish what can be used in order to address the issues aforementioned and obtain the goals. So, the first thing giving your company distinct competencies are the resources, such as the fact you are government owned and therefore supported wholly. You have a vast area of operation geographically speaking, as well as a wide customer base in all areas of demography, both rich and poor, those who are interested in, for example, greener energy, etc., etc. And lastly, you have capabilities of different energy sources. This means that you are not just relying on fossil fuels, but you've also got some experience in wind as well as other sources of energy. And this gives you superiority in that you have experience in different areas of energy and understanding of the customer base. For example, what in regards to the social climate, what the customers are happy with regards to pricing plans as well as sources of energy. And thus your value lies in combining your resources to oncoming trends. And thus we can see in summation of your internal situation, your strengths and your weaknesses, that despite consumer understanding as well as diversity in energy operations, you are currently only relying on revenue from your energy consumption or by your customers. There's also a large amount of wastage, particularly in the natural gas, due to trying to match up demand as in both base load and peak loads. And the government control can restrict many operations. Now, we shall look externally And the first thing we shall look at is a peace analysis which consists of political, economic, ecological, societal, as well as technological factors. Now these macro factors are interlinked. For example, with regards to the political spectrum, within the politicians in the US, there is an increasing tendency leading towards green energy. With regards to the economic situation, you are maybe restricted by the debt ceiling, especially with the recent US government debt performance. With regards to the ecological here, you can see that they are now trying to open up and develop, and this ecological here is related to the technological factor here, where we can see that there are, globally speaking, there is also an increase in trying to develop these green technologies. And with regards to societal, within the US, you can say the Gini coefficient seems to be increasing, which is to do with income inequality. And this is important because with regards to investment, it can affect where the government and thus the politicians, when they make their budgetary decisions, where they actually want to put their money. And another societal factor is the increasing interest towards green. And it should say here also that nuclear energy is also becoming frowned upon. Now, when we look at the trends and key industry success factors facing the industry, first thing we notice here, as previously mentioned, are increasing interest in green on all fronts, as well as the possibility of fracking. Now, when it comes to the status of the KISS, or the key industry success factors, we can see here that the efficient operation, as well as the positive social perception, these are in development or unattained by your company, currently speaking. And the way we can propose for you to achieve these key industry success factors is by trying to leverage the political interest as well as the social trend towards income inequality and cheaper energy. And now Brian shall explain to you, your company the alternatives situations.
Thank you, James. Yeah, we've lined up some alternatives that we wanted to evaluate to give the best solution to you. The first alternative is to look at the short-term demand, because demand is increasing, and your company has set a goal to close down some of the coal plants that you have. So this would be to go against, well, you have the increasing demand and you want to keep that down. And then at the same time, we want you to look at a new pricing strategy. As you mentioned in the case, you can actually do something about the usage, so you don't have the peak times increased, so you can level it out. Our second alternative is a midterm focus. In this alternative, we want you to focus on renewable energy and to go with natural gas plants, and also to focus on the more greener side of the business. Our third alternative is long-term development. This might require investment in nuclear plants or coal plants, but the coal plants, you're closing them down, so there is a risk that consumers would not like that idea, and therefore that is a con. So these are the three alternatives, and now I will give Agatha the opportunity to continue.
Thank you very much, Brian. Now, just to quickly recap on the goals proposed. First of all, we suggest you to strive to increase your sources of alternative energy, as well as optimize the capacity and distribution, and minimize external reliance. So in face of these goals, we have created criteria to evaluate each of the alternatives Brian explained. And these criteria will help us to select an alternative to fulfill your capabilities, minimize costs, and strive for sustainability. And as you can see, the most important factor here is impact. How the alternative is going to impact the operating costs, what capacity is going to be added, and is the alternative sustainable. Now, after evaluating these alternatives, you can see that alternative to be focused on midterm is the one that will able to give you the strategy. Now, Boniface will explain you our actual recommendation.
Thank you very much. So, as previously mentioned, we are searching for a strategy that is going to allow for longevity in the business model, as well as we are going to minimize our costs and try to fulfill the demand that we cannot today. So in the face of this, we are suggesting you to come up with a real balanced midterm strategy that will include focusing on wind projects and on natural gas to ride the trend. But what we actually mean by this is that you need to fulfill key enablers in the short term and in the midterm to reach these long-term goals. Now, firstly, you can see it in the industry that you have an 11% external procurement as you cannot fulfill your demand. So this creates problems. This costs a lot of money. This market hunger costs a lot of capital, as well as you have a lack of peak response capability. So what we suggest you is to increase your exposure when it comes to wind farms and actually invest into 20 new wind farms. This will greatly decrease the exposure that you currently have in terms of the external procurement, as well as it will gain you positive points with the government, and it is a capital-friendly option indeed. What we suggest you to do is to set up these plants on the borders of East Tennessee, and this is due to the fact that the state itself is lacking in wind power, and due to the currents coming in from the Mexican Gulf of Mexico is located and goes through East Tennessee. So this is the best chance to maximize the efficiency of these wind farms. But on the other hand, when we turn to the midterm issues, when we turn to the midterm, we are suggesting the organization to make use of natural gas due to the fracking trend, hydraulic fracturing trends, which will enable you to force down fuel costs to be friendly when it comes to investment, as well as you are going to gain governmental support due to this environmentally friendly recommendation. So what we suggest you to do is to firstly commence with setting up 6 plants, and on the long term to set up 13 plants. Now these plants are very responsive when it comes to peak demand, and you currently cannot fulfill peak demand. And these combustion engines in the natural gas plants will actually help you to distribute your focus from base to peak service fulfillment. And in order to put this to a pragmatic perspective, IBA will take over and later delineate how to align customer needs with this new strategy. So that is to be laid out later. So now we can see that as soon as you fulfill these key enablers in the short term and during the midterm, you're going to be able to make use of this strategy so that you will create longevity and you will minimize external risk. You will be able to react to peak demand, distribute your resources efficiently, and you can dodge premature investments. We do not suggest you to engage in investing to nuclear power plants, as there are lots of hindrances and political problems and political meddling when it comes to that. So this is what we suggest you to do in short and midterm to make use of your capabilities and trends. So now let us see the pragmatic implications of the strategy.
Thank you very much. Now, the most important thing to do for your company is to decrease the costs and increase capacity. So we address this issue on the short term by creating wind farms and by educating customers. Now this will both decrease your costs due to the fact that renewable energy is a smaller investment than other sources, as well as customer education will help you to create a more legible distribution between base hours and peak hours. Going further, as Boniface said, we suggest you to create the natural gas plants to balance off to be able to sustain the demand in peak hours. And as you said, you are planning to reduce the coal plants, and therefore you might want to evaluate the need for a nuclear plant because you're planning to reduce your capacity by 5,500 megawatts. So you will need something to sustain it. So we suggest to evaluate the need for a nuclear plant once the elimination phase gets closer to the end. Now, on the other side, first of all, once the customer education has been running for 4 years, of course you have to evaluate it. However, we have seen 2 very interesting trends in the market. First of all, there are possibilities to store electricity in cells. Now, currently this technology is very expensive. However, we firmly believe that within 6 years, there will be technological advances that will drive down costs. as well as biomass is a technology that is used to create natural gas from waste, and James will tell you a bit more about it in a second. But this is a possibility how your company could actually have an alternate source of natural gas in order to protect itself against the volatility of natural gas pricing. So now James will explain you what is biomass.
Thank you, Phil. First of all, I'll briefly introduce the concept. Organic waste, such as food, for example, and paper, and other farming waste, when they're broken down by naturally occurring bacteria, they can release methane gas. This has already been practiced now, currently, in various Baltic states. So it is proven to work. And the benefit of this is that the waste companies, they shall benefit. The people shall benefit because it relies on them throwing out waste. But furthermore, it can benefit the state as a whole because of the amount invested required is relatively low. And thus, based on this simple principle, waste and bacteria can lead to energy. And the benefit of this is that optimized capacity leads to a sustainable energy source, because as long as people are getting rid of organic waste, there will be energy. And furthermore, it counters the political and economic as well as social barriers which may be present in other form of energy acquisition. And we all lastly propose statewide contracts lock-in for about 20 years, thereabout, in order to have some security. And now Agatha shall elaborate further with regards to implementation.
Okay, thank you very much. Now just to quickly say, okay?
Oh.
Okay, so the thing that we had next was we proposed a way how to educate your customers. And what we did was we suggested to educate your customers throughout all ages in order to reach higher customer outreach. So first of all, children and teenagers are becoming more and more involved in the decision making of the whole family, especially in the US. So targeting them will actually improve the way how energy is consumed by adults, and of course we are targeting young adults as well. Now Brian shall explain some financials for you.
Thank you, Agatha. First, we want to look at the capacity needs that your company is facing. That capacity that is put up here is actually the capacity that you need to replace while you're closing down the coal plants. The second one is because it is estimated that in the next 20 years, the demand will increase by 1% annually. So this is the total increase after 20 years. The third one here is that we want you to not rely on other producers of energy. So this is what you need to eliminate if you want to be self-sustainable in this sense. So the total capacity needed is 16,000 megawatts. The investment needs short term is the 20 wind farms and the 6 natural gas plants that is going to go in against the coal plants, and 20 wind farms is to drive down cost. That investment is $4.2 billion. On the long-term investment, there are 13 natural gas plants with a capacity of 9,300 megawatts, and the investment is $8.45 billion. So the total investment needed is $12.65 billion, as you can see down here. So the amount up here, $12.6 billion, with the rate of 7.5, because we want to go through bonds in a long term, will actually help you have an NPV after 20 years of 10.5 billion. And the positive cash flow will actually be seen by 2020. So this is the outcome of your investment. Now, Boniface will conclude this presentation.
Thank you very much, Brian. So, ladies and gentlemen and jury, we propose that we are going to create a foundation for long-term sustainability. Firstly, we are going to architect this by eradicating hindrances. Short-term wind projects as proposed is going to fulfill the gap that you currently have, as well as we are going to create a balance between base and peak hours, and this is going to be fulfilled by investing into natural gas plants, and in roughly 20 years this is going to pay itself off and going to be resulting in an optimized capacity and a very stable cash flow. So right now, we would like to thank you for your attention and like to hear your questions.
Thank you. Who wants to kick off? Peter?
Thinking of what you've said, you seem to be placing in the short term a lot of focus on wind farms. Why just the short term?
The motivation behind setting up wind farms in the short term is because the construction cycles of these wind farms the cycle is only a year. And currently we are in a deep deficiency when it comes to production, so we would like to eradicate this imbalance, and we would like to be self-sustainable when it comes to energy production. So on the short term, we have this winter project to eradicate the hindrances and to be able to start laying down the foundation for this future sustainability.
And if I can add, okay, the 20 wind farms will of course run for the 20 years that they're projected to run. So they will contribute throughout the entire period. But as Bonnie said, they're easy to build. It takes not as much as if you're going to make a coal plant or nuclear plant, for instance. So in that sense, you will be quicker in responding to the market needs.
Well, so you've got to find 4.2 billion, I think it was. How are you going to go about financing it?
Well, I can, if you go to, we have some.
Additional slides?
Well, yeah, you can take that one. We wanted to take up, which I know this is a lot of numbers, and that's why it's in additional slides. We have the cash flow both for the wind farms and the natural gas up here. If I can have it going, thank you. So this is the cash flow and the annual cost that you will have. These are the loan payments that you see here. And so we'll have a positive cash flow in 2020. This all leads to that it is a good investment because you have a net present value at the example.
So you're going to finance this by issuing loan bonds, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions?
So you're proposing that we invest 12.65 billion into the wind farms and the natural gas. What are the risks of investing in those particular areas of energy?
Okay. Okay. Well, the first thing is that legislation, as we are expanding in natural gas, there may be future legislation, especially with the current government, which is starting to favour green energy gradually. So there may be legislation hindering that, and so to mitigate that, we would step up municipal lobbying. And in failure to turn that, then we would turn more focus towards more natural as well as green projects. And currently, we are to, for example, expand on wind and try to look into other energy sources as well. Furthermore, if there are issues such as debt ceiling, the debt ceiling is lower, then we secure private investors in order to mitigate this. However, failing that, what we do is we reduce the number of bonds we're actually giving out. And lastly, if the demand surges above the expectation, then we try to have capacity generated at 10%. So where we would tell the designers to accommodate more than we actually originally want as peak. And this, of course, we'll get this information as we are actually developing the projects and we look at trends in energy. And if, for example, in the original design process, we find that the energy requirement is actually increasing at a quicker rate than we expect, then we hope that the 10% extra capacity will cover that. But failure to reach that, the recommendation thus is to increase the prices in order to try and encourage consumers not to spend so much energy.
If I may put this to the strategic perspective, we are designing with natural and wind projects as to mitigate the risks of political or societal fallouts when it comes to very long-term projects but stable projects such as nuclear power. So we were trying to choose the safe side when it comes to political meddling, but we were trying to strive for further sustainability. So we factor the risks into the decision making.
Did you want to come in? Or I hadn't rejoined it to.
Yeah, no, that.
to-
I've got a
to your
question, but
response. Did you want to come
yeah,
in?
I can do after.
Yes, I'm. Thank you for the presentation. You use an assumption of 7.5% interest rates. Yeah, is that the cost of capital of 7.5%? Yeah. What do you think are the risks really associated with that rate, particularly over the long period of time we've been investing? That's a concern of mine. What risks could you advise me of which I should be aware in actually choosing that 7.5% rate?
Well, yeah, if you want to.
Okay. Okay. The major risks at the moment are related to the banks. It does depend on which bank is actually giving you the loan as well. So be very cautious as to check the actual bank's record when you ask for the loan, or of course if it's a private loan, for example, if you decide to choose that instead, check their record. And this is because a lot of uncertainty since 2008, economic uncertainty has happened, and thus I think, well, we think that to check the records of the persons giving you the investment is the best way to secure against that. And furthermore, I recommend that you have a contract where you actually lock in a certain amount, which can help increase your security.
And should the economy go into, we are in a recession at the moment, and of course those are very risky situations for investment. But what do you think should be my outlook for the future? What could you advise me in terms of the recessionary pressures and the impact on your proposed investment plan?
If it's impossible to sell the long-term bonds in that sense, you can switch to the shorter-term bonds. The rate, therefore, will not be as high, but you can do the implementation gradually in that sense. So you would cover yourself over the long term. But then, of course, you need to establish your natural gas plants gradually instead of 13 at one time, basically.
Thank you. I'd like Martha, you wanted to.
Yeah, I had a question actually about the sort of long-term goal towards looking at biomass and energy created from that. And you mentioned that it will be good for people and also waste management companies. But you said that one of the things that you wanted for this organisation was to minimise external reliance, and that seems to me like it would be sort of actually increasing our external reliance, because we all the supply of the food and the waste would be coming from waste manufacturers. And I was wondering if you sort of could expand on how you would kind of look at
I
that.
don't think it would increase external reliance, because the fact is, on a daily basis, we produce waste, both organic and biodegradable, as well as the non-biodegradable. So I actually don't think it's relying too much, because it happens all around anyway. And as long as we are producing waste, as humans and otherwise, there will be something from which the power can be generated, because it's for all organic matter, this is. So it's not just food, it's also farming, and to say holistically that it's going to be going down, I just don't think this is a very realistic.
May I supplement that? We believe that this strategy comes with numerous positive political spillovers. So for example, when it comes to securing governmental bonds or loans due to the quantitative easing, we are going to be, of course, making use of this. When it comes to bio projects, wind projects, we are going to increase our ties with the municipality and the government. So we are trying to wire this strategy in to the political political level of decision making.
It's gone.
It's gone.
Your time's up.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening, Martha.